The World That Awaits After Nightfall. Chapter 1, The First Light Beyond the Curtain of Night. When the world grows quiet and the last breath of night clings softly to the air, I begin to stir. It's not a waking like any other. My eyes do not open to an alarm or a sunbeam slicing through curtains. There is no sound of morning birds or bustling footsteps above. Instead, there is stillness, a kind of hush that feels both ancient and new, like the moment just before a story begins. And in that stillness, I rise, not from a bed, but from a space that feels neither here nor there. Each time, I find myself standing in a place I do not remember falling asleep in. The floor beneath my feet is cool, smooth, and glows faintly, like moonlight that forgot to fade. Above, the sky is a deep shade of indigo, tinged with gentle swirls of silver, and stars hang motionless, as if the world has paused to listen. This place only reveals itself after the night has ended, but before day dares to begin. It exists between seconds, in a breath that never finishes exhaling. I step forward, and the space greets me with a subtle breeze, soft as a sigh, carrying with it the scent of lavender and something older, something like forgotten pages in an untouched library. There are no signs or maps. No instructions. And yet, I never feel lost. My feet know where to go, as if memory lives in movement rather than mind. I walk. A path begins to form beneath my steps, not paved or planned, but growing, as though the earth is remembering it with each footfall. The path is made of smooth, shimmering stone that hums faintly under pressure, a tune too soft to hear but not to feel. It winds through tall grasses that sway without wind, their tips aglow with soft light, like the fireflies have chosen to sleep on them. To my left, a tree begins to take shape from the mist. Not grow, form. Its branches curl inwards, then unfold slowly, deliberately, like someone stretching after a long nap. Its leaves glisten in the half-light, translucent and still. I reach out, and though I do not touch it, I feel its presence like warmth near a flame. The tree seems to recognize me. Or perhaps, remember me. I continue. Soon, the landscape begins to open. Hills like gentle waves stretch out before me, blanketed in petals that move not with the wind, but with thought. When I pause to admire them, they bloom wider, leaning in as if to listen. I whisper nothing to them, and they seem to sigh in reply. Far ahead, the faint outline of a structure emerges, a gate. Not grand or looming, but delicate. Made not of wood or stone, but of woven light, like threads of early dawn sewn into shape. It flickers gently, not because it is unstable, but because it is alive. As I approach, the gate does not resist. It opens inward, a silent invitation. Beyond it lies a clearing, bathed in soft hues that cannot be named, colors that seem to change as you try to describe them, like dreams that fade the moment you try to remember. In the center of this clearing is a pool. Perfectly still. Its surface not water, but memory, shifting with echoes I cannot hear. I kneel by the edge, peering into it. My reflection does not look back. Instead, I see a different version of this place, one where the sky is deeper, the trees taller, the silence even more profound. A world not parallel, but folded within this one, like pages in a book. I do not know how long I stay there. Time here is not a line but a circle, or maybe a breath held too long. The world around me is patient. Eventually, I stand and begin to walk again. The clearing gives way to a forest, tall, slender trees with bark as pale as pearl and leaves that chime softly when brushed. I run my fingers along one, and a ripple moves through the canopy, like laughter shared among old friends. As I walk, small lights appear around me. Not fireflies, something slower, calmer. They drift like ash in reverse, floating up from the earth and disappearing above, leaving behind no trace but a warm feeling in the chest. Each light, I sense, holds a story. Perhaps even mine. I come to a small bench beneath a leaning tree. The bench is carved from stone, yet soft to the touch. I sit. The world around me does not shift or fade. It settles. Here, the air feels thick with restfulness, like every particle hums with the comfort of knowing nothing urgent awaits. No tasks, no voices, no names to be remembered. Only being. I lean back and close my eyes, not because I am tired, but because this place asks nothing more of me. Behind my eyelids, I see colors that swirl gently, patterns that rise and fall like tides. I hear something like music, but not made by instruments. It comes from everything. The trees, the stones, the sky, even the silence. It is a world made not of things, but of feelings. A place that forms not with construction, but with care. Where light does not chase shadow, but dances with it. Where time is not kept, but cradled. And I realize, softly, that this world is always here. Waiting behind the curtain of night, patient as the stars, hidden in the stillness that we forget to notice. I open my eyes again, and nothing has changed. I smile. And I walk onward. Chapter 2, The Garden Where Shadows Bloom. The path ahead narrowed, curving gently through a grove of trees so slender they seemed drawn in ink. Their trunks shimmered with a pale glow, not white, but the soft hue of moonlight on fresh snow. Above, their branches reached toward one another, weaving a ceiling of leaves like stained glass, except instead of colored panes, the spaces were filled with moving dusk, quietly swirling as if stirred by some unseen breath. I walked beneath them, each step padded by moss that welcomed my feet like memory foam, remembering shapes I hadn't known I'd made before. The air had thickened slightly, though not uncomfortably. It was rich, like deep water, or an old song. And then I saw it, the entrance to the garden. It didn't announce itself. There was no gate, no arch, no sign. Just a slow fading of trees and an opening filled with a quiet glow that drew me forward. The garden waited. It stretched wide and low, like a sea of stillness. The plants within it were unlike any I had ever known. Some grew downward, their blossoms hanging like lanterns from invisible threads. Others unfolded horizontally, their petals drifting just above the earth, hovering without roots. The colors here were dreamlike, purples that leaned into blue, greens tinged with gold, and flowers that shimmered not with light, but with presence. But it was the shadows that made the place truly strange. They bloomed. Wherever there was shade, something grew. Not dark, lifeless blotches as one would expect, but delicate, ink-black flowers with velvety petals. They unfurled from the places where sunlight would have shied away, beneath overhangs, behind stones, or nestled inside the crooks of bent branches. They pulsed softly, as if breathing. I bent down to examine one, and as I got closer, I realized something impossible. The shadow flowers were not just absorbing darkness, they were remembering it. In the heart of each bloom was a flicker of an old moment. Not mine, not directly, but familiar all the same. A hand reaching for another. A laugh shared under rain. The closing of a well-worn book. I didn't see them with my eyes so much as feel them, as if each flower whispered a gentle scene into the fabric of the world. I walked through the garden slowly, reverently. Each step brought me past memories that weren't mine, yet didn't feel foreign. They reminded me of what it meant to live with softness, with curiosity. There was no sorrow in these shadows, only depth. The kind of depth that gives meaning to light, not fear. Near the center of the garden stood a low, circular fountain. It didn't flow like fountains usually do. Instead, its water rose in small beads that hovered in place, like dew caught in slow time. They reflected the garden around them, but not exactly. When I looked into them, I saw parts of this place I hadn't visited yet, paths that led into fog, bridges that arched over invisible rivers. I reached out and let one of the beads touch my skin. It didn't fall. It held its shape, resting on my palm like a soft thought. It felt cool, not cold, and sent a faint warmth into my chest, like a string being gently plucked inside me. I left it there and moved on. As I passed a bend in the path, I came to a tree unlike the others. It was tall and full, its bark deep blue, and from its branches hung hundreds of bells. Tiny, delicate bells of glass and silver and bone. They didn't ring at once. Instead, each chimed in its own time, some after I passed beneath them, others before I reached them, as if they knew I was coming. Their tones were soft, like wind through feathers, or snow landing on water. Not songs exactly, but gentle acknowledgments, like old friends nodding in greeting. I sat beneath that tree, letting its sound settle around me. And as I sat, I began to notice the garden changing, not in a way that startled, but one that welcomed. The flowers leaned in slightly. The shadow blooms opened wider. The moss beneath me thickened, cushioning me deeper. I felt held. As though the garden was cradling me without hands. I closed my eyes for a moment, and in the dark behind my lids, I saw more of those flickering memories. This time, they felt closer. A moment from childhood, a sky full of stars, a whispered secret, the hush of snow. I didn't remember these things from my waking life. But somehow, they belonged to me. Or perhaps, I belonged to them. I stayed until the bells stopped chiming. Not because they had to. Because they had said what they came to say. When I stood again, the garden did not resist. It let me go with the same quiet it had offered me upon entry. As I walked toward the far edge, I noticed something for the first time. There were footprints, soft imprints in the moss ahead of me. Not fresh, not old. Just there. Someone had walked this path before. Perhaps not recently, perhaps not physically. But the memory of their steps remained. I followed them. They led to a small archway of woven vines, gently shifting in the unseen breeze. And just before I passed through, I looked back at the garden. It glowed faintly, as if exhaling. Not goodbye. Just, until next time. And then I stepped through the arch, into whatever waited beyond. Chapter 3, The River That Reflects Forgotten Songs. The archway behind me faded as I stepped through, not with sound or spectacle, but like a breath quietly leaving the lips. Ahead, the air changed. It grew cooler, softer, and I felt it brush past me as if it carried stories too fragile to speak aloud. The path no longer wound, it flowed. It curved gently toward the sound of water. Not the crash or rush of a mountain stream, nor the lapping waves of a restless sea. This was something else. A melody hidden within motion. It sang without words, a hum of the earth remembering how to dream. As I moved closer, the trees gave way to light. Not sunlight, but a kind of luminous twilight that kissed the landscape with silver and blue. The ground beneath me darkened, and soon I stood before the river. It stretched wide and endless, its surface smooth as glass. But unlike a mirror, it did not reflect what stood above. Instead, it held images from someplace deeper, echoes of songs never sung aloud, melodies born from emotion rather than sound. I stepped closer. There were no ripples, yet the water shimmered like it remembered movement. In its surface, I saw not myself, but scenes unfolding. A figure dancing barefoot in snow. Fingers trailing across the strings of an unseen harp. Laughter rising through a canopy of spring leaves. These were not memories from my life, at least not that I could name. But they felt like mine all the same. Not as moments I had lived, but as songs I had once known, long ago, in a place without language. I knelt beside the river and placed my hand near its edge. The water responded. A single tone rose, not from the river itself, but from the space around me. It was clear and soft, like a lullaby hummed beneath one's breath. The tone lingered in the air, and as it did, the river's images changed. Now I saw myself, not my face or my form, but the shape of my presence. A figure walking through fog. A voice carried on wind. A pair of eyes watching stars flicker just before dawn. And then, music. It began slowly, not from a single source, but from all directions. as if the landscape itself had decided to sing. The trees hummed low harmonies, the stones added rhythm, and the river offered melody, fluid, shimmering, impossible to hold but impossible to ignore. I did not try to name the instruments. There were none. And yet I felt strings, wind, percussion, even voices, but they were not voices that spoke words. They carried meaning directly into the heart, bypassing thought. Each note was an emotion. Each chord, a memory I hadn't yet recalled. I stood. As I did, the river shifted. A narrow bridge of light extended from where I stood across its surface, not built, but born. Made of song rather than stone. I stepped onto it. The bridge did not feel like walking on anything solid. Each step was a note, and with every movement forward, I added to the harmony. My passage became part of the music. The river below showed scenes as I passed, not from any life I remembered, but from the dream of the world itself. A mother humming to her child, a boy skipping stones under the moon, a lover waiting by a lantern that never extinguished. By the time I reached the other side, I had forgotten my footsteps. I had only the music. The far bank opened into a wide, sloping shore of soft blue grass, glowing faintly under the pale sky. Small flowers lined the edge, their petals curled like the shells of sleeping snails. And among them, instruments rested. Not man-made, not carved or crafted. Grown. One looked like a flute made of wind-blown glass. Another, a stringed shape with no beginning or end. They did not ask to be played. They simply existed. Sound lived within them, waiting only to be noticed. I sat beside them, not to play, but to listen. The music didn't need me. It was already complete. Yet as I sat, something inside me softened. My breathing aligned with the rhythm. My heart, once steady, began to sway with the pulse of it all. And then, the singing began. Not voices in the usual sense, but something like them. Echoes of people I had never met, singing songs I somehow knew. Each voice distinct, yet part of the same whole. I did not understand the language, if it was language at all, but I understood the feeling, gentleness, patience, belonging. One of the flowers near me opened, its petals parting slowly. Inside was a tiny droplet of silver light, and when it touched the ground, it became sound. A single note, delicate and pure, joining the symphony that surrounded me. I watched as more flowers bloomed, each offering their note. Some rose slowly, others drifted skyward like dandelion seeds. The air filled with harmonies that felt like warm memories and quiet forgiveness. I lay back in the grass. Above me, the sky shifted colors, not violently, but with grace. Pale golds turning to soft purples. Indigo fading into ash blue. A cloudless sky of motionless stars blinked gently, as if winking in time with the song. And beneath it all, the river continued to reflect the songs of the forgotten. Not lost. Never lost. Just waiting. waiting for someone to remember that they were once sung, once heard, once felt. And now, in this moment, remembered again. I closed my eyes. The music didn't end. It faded, slowly, like dusk folding into itself. Not because it was gone, but because I no longer needed to hear it aloud. It was inside me now. I stood once more, not rushed, not urged. The path beyond curved upward, away from the river, toward a gentle hill that pulsed with golden fog. And as I walked, the river behind me whispered its final note. Not farewell, but thank you. Chapter 4, The Clock That Ticks in Reverse. The hill rose gently before me, wrapped in a slow-moving fog the color of old parchment and early morning light. It drifted in lazy spirals, neither warm nor cold, carrying the faint scent of time-worn paper and something sweet, like dried flowers kept in a forgotten drawer. Each step upward felt softer than the last, as if gravity had become more forgiving. The ground yielded beneath my feet, not sinking, not resisting, but responding, as though it remembered every traveler who had come before and chose to welcome me the same way. At the top of the hill stood a structure. Not a tower, not a house. It was neither ancient nor modern, neither built nor grown. Its shape was simple, a round chamber with no visible door. The walls shimmered like thick glass, yet clouded in the center, revealing only shifting silhouettes within. Above it, a great clock floated, unattached to anything, spinning slowly in reverse. Its hands did not jerk or click. They glided, smooth and steady, moving backward with unwavering rhythm. With each sweep, I felt the air around me shift, not in temperature or pressure, but in weight, as if invisible moments were being drawn out of the atmosphere and gathered into the clock's unseen gears. As I approached, the chamber acknowledged me. A single seam appeared in the wall, and with a gentle sigh, it opened inward. I stepped inside. The world fell silent. Not the silence of emptiness, but of focus, like a room holding its breath. The chamber was circular and lit by a soft glow from the floor itself. Around its perimeter were hundreds of clocks, tall grandfather clocks, delicate pocket watches, sundials that turned without light, hourglasses with silver sand flowing upward. Each ticked backward. Each measured not time passing, but time returning. In the center of the room stood a pedestal. Upon it, a single object, a timepiece that mirrored none of the others. It had no hands, no numbers, no face. Just a smooth, round surface that pulsed faintly with light. I reached out, and as my fingers hovered just above it, the clocks around the room responded. Tick tick tick. Not louder, but closer. Like their rhythm had shifted from the room to inside my chest. My heart didn't race, it slowed, syncing with the reversed beat of the place. I touched the surface. Suddenly, the chamber faded, not away, but inward. I wasn't pulled out of it. It folded into me. I saw myself. Not standing here now, but walking backward through memories. Me sitting on a windowsill, then standing, then walking in reverse through a door I had already entered. Me reading a letter, only now the words leapt back onto the page. Me laughing with someone whose name I could almost remember, but not quite. And then, older moments. I saw myself as a child, unwrapping a gift with trembling hands, then rewrapping it, sealing tape with careful care. I saw myself letting go of a balloon that rose into the sky, only now descending perfectly into my palm. But none of it brought sorrow. Not regret. It was gentle. This was not a replay of wounds. It was a reminder that time, too, can be soft. That it does not always march forward, relentless and sharp. Sometimes, it circles back to show us what we missed when we rushed through. The chamber whispered something now, not in words, but in sensation. What you carry is not only what happened, but what lingers. And what lingers can be healed, not erased. I let go of the timepiece. The vision receded, but the feeling remained. Around me, the clocks continued to tick in reverse. And as I listened, I realized they were not counting down, but unwinding. Easing the world of burdens too tightly wound. There were no exits in the chamber. Only that seam I had entered through. But when I turned, I found the wall had shifted. Where it had once shimmered like fogged glass, it now offered a doorway formed of flowing ribbons of light, slowly curling like smoke. I stepped through. Outside, the hill remained. But now, the sky above had softened. Where once it was deep indigo, it had now paled into a color somewhere between lilac and pearl. Stars still shone, but dimmer, more distant, as if tucking themselves in. I walked down the opposite side of the hill, the ground humming faintly underfoot. Behind me, the structure with the reversed clock began to fade, not vanish, just retreat into memory. And as I descended, I realized something had changed inside me. There was no sudden revelation. No epiphany wrapped in golden light. Just a slow, unfolding sense of release. A loosening. Not of knowledge, but of need, the need to hold on to time so tightly. I reached a field at the base of the hill. The grass here was short, soft, and shimmered with dew that glowed faintly blue. In the center of the field stood a single sundial, its shadow pointing toward the stars. But there was no sun. And yet the shadow remained. I stood beside it, and without thinking, reached out to touch it. The moment I did, I heard a sound behind me. Not a voice. Not music. A heartbeat. My own, slowed to a pace so calm it nearly became silence. And in that space between beats, I heard the most curious thing. A laugh I had long forgotten. It was my own. Soft, young, unburdened. And for a moment, I let it echo. Then, gently, I walked onward. Chapter 5, The Mirror Without a Reflection. The field behind me slowly faded into the softness of distance, as though the world itself was turning a page. The grass no longer shimmered. The sky grew gentler. Time, now unwound, had become a hush. The path ahead narrowed once more, though it was no longer made of stone or moss or anything I could name. It simply was. It formed underfoot like thought, responding to my presence with silent purpose. I followed it, not because it led anywhere I knew, but because it seemed to understand that I was ready. Soon, I saw it. At the center of an open hollow stood a frame. No walls, no roof. Just a frame suspended in the air, about my height, perfectly still. A mirror, or what should have been one. Its surface was glass, but it showed nothing. Not me. Not the sky. Not the trees behind it. It reflected absence. But not in a way that felt cold. It wasn't empty, it was quiet. Like a pond with no wind, holding not water but possibility. I stepped closer. The frame was ornate, though not in a way that suggested human hands. It seemed shaped by memory, not by tool, curves grown rather than carved, silvered edges that shimmered faintly with distant starlight. I could feel something humming within it, like a question waiting patiently for an answer. I stood before it. And still, no reflection. No image. No echo of my shape. Just a surface that swallowed light gently, holding it close like secrets in the dark. I reached out my hand, not to touch, but to ask. To let the mirror know I was here. And the glass responded. Not with an image, but with depth. The surface rippled, not like water, but like time. And in that ripple, I saw moments, not of who I was, but of who I wasn't. Paths not taken. Words never said. Doors never opened. A version of me who had turned left instead of right. A version who had spoken when I stayed silent. A version who stayed when I had walked away. Not regrets. Not wishes. Simply, possibilities. The mirror did not judge. It did not label these moments as better or worse. It simply offered them, like pages in a book I'd never read, gently fanned open in a breeze that never came. And then the ripples stilled. The surface cleared. Now, I saw something new, not me, not a version of me, but the space I had made by being who I was. The echoes of kindness left in others. The warmth of presence in forgotten rooms. The smile I never noticed receiving, reflected back now with quiet reverence. It was not a mirror for the eyes. It was a mirror for the soul. And it was showing me the things that never appear in glass. The things we carry that cast no shadow, make no sound. The quiet way we change the world just by walking through it. I stepped forward, close enough for my breath to fog the surface. But it didn't. Instead, the glass shimmered, and something stirred within it, a slow unraveling of light, like threads weaving into shape. A figure appeared. Not me. But also, me. Not in form, but in feeling. It looked like someone I could be, if all I carried fell away. If I remembered all the laughter I had once forgotten. If I forgave every tiny wound I never admitted was mine. This version of me did not smile. It simply existed. Softly. Steadily. With peace. And then, gently, it raised its hand. I raised mine too, and though our palms would have met in another mirror, this time they passed through. No resistance. No shock. Just warmth. I stepped forward. And found myself inside the mirror. Or perhaps, the mirror had stepped inside me. The world around me had changed. It was no longer a place of paths or hills or fields. It was not a place at all. It was space. Not emptiness, but openness. A sky with no stars, yet full of light. A ground that held me without texture. I was not floating. I was known. There was no sound. But there was understanding. No movement. But endless motion. And then, faint at first, a hum returned. Familiar. Like the river's song. Like the bells in the garden. Like the heartbeat beneath the sundial. All the songs of this world returning to a single note. And I stood in its center, listening. Not to words, but to presence. It whispered. You are not only what is seen. You are what remains when sight is gone. You are the echo in quiet rooms. The warmth in forgotten places. The step taken without witness. You are the reflection that never appears because it lives in others. I closed my eyes. And the mirror faded, not gone, but gently released, like a hand let go after a long, comforting touch. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in the hollow once more. The frame remained. But its surface was now still. No reflection. No ripple. Just silence. And in that silence, I smiled. Not because I understood everything. But because I no longer needed to. I turned from the mirror and walked onward. The sky above had begun to change again, slipping toward a golden edge. The light was not dawn, but something like it. Not a beginning. Not an end. Just a turning. And I was ready for whatever waited next. Chapter 6, The World That Waits for No One. The mirror, now quiet behind me, faded into the mist like a chapter lovingly closed. I didn't look back, not out of dismissal, but because I felt no need. What it had shown me, I carried now. Not in my hands, but in the stillness of my chest. The path ahead was neither narrow nor wide. It simply stretched forward, carved not by footsteps, but by presence. It led into a landscape that shimmered with the hue of hesitation, soft grays, pale silvers, the color of something just about to happen but never quite arriving. I walked slowly. Not because I was tired. But because the world asked for quiet here. It was a vast plain, neither empty nor full. Grasses of faded gold waved gently without wind. Stones rested like thoughts too heavy to move. And in the sky above, clouds hung motionless, painted there by someone with a soft hand and a peaceful heart. At the horizon, I saw it. A city. Or the memory of one. Its towers shimmered like heat rising from sand, shifting in and out of form. No sharp angles. No lights in windows. Just outlines, soft, pale, flickering in and out like breath. I knew immediately, this was the world that waits for no one. And yet, it was waiting for me. Not out of need. Not out of invitation. It simply existed, and I had arrived. As I entered its borderless edges, the air changed again. It was denser, like walking through old stories. The buildings weren't built from stone or glass. They were constructed of time. Of paused decisions. Of silences left too long. Every wall shimmered with the weight of things that might have been. Yet there was no sorrow here. No judgment. This city didn't mourn what never came. It simply held it. Each step echoed softly, as though the ground beneath remembered countless footsteps that had never been taken. I passed under archways that leaned slightly forward, like they were listening. I passed through courtyards where trees stood with no leaves, but from their branches hung clocks with no hands, gently turning. At the center of the city, I found the square. And in its center stood a statue. Not of a person, but of an idea, a figure made of light and shadow interwoven. It shifted as I looked at it, never taking one single form, yet always familiar. Sometimes I saw a face. Other times, I saw a silhouette of something I had forgotten but missed. I sat beside it on the low edge of the fountain, which held no water, only light. It pulsed faintly, like a resting heartbeat. I watched it, feeling no need to move, no need to speak. Just be. After a long time, or maybe no time at all, a sound arose. Not music. Not voice. Just a note. Singular. Whole. It rang through the city like a ripple in still air. And the buildings responded. They shimmered once, and then gently began to disappear. Not fade, not crumble, just release. Like breath finally exhaled after being held too long. I watched as towers melted into light. As courtyards dissolved into memory. As the square itself softened, and the statue dissolved into 1,000 specks of gold that rose into the quiet sky. The world that waited for no one was letting go. Because I had arrived, and so it no longer needed to wait. I stood. Around me, the city was gone. In its place was openness. Not emptiness, openness. Space for something new. Or for nothing at all. Above, the sky began to glow, not with sunrise, not with any source I could name. It just brightened gently, like the soft turning of a page in a well-worn book. I realized then. This place was never meant to be stayed in. It wasn't a destination dot. It was a passage dot. A waiting room between dreams. And now, it was time to move on. To where? I didn't know. I didn't need to. Because something inside me had shifted. I no longer searched. I no longer chased. I simply walked. One step. Then another. Not toward something. Just with something. With the gentle hum of the river. With the soft chiming of the garden. With the reversed ticking of the clock. With the unspoken memory of the mirror. And with the world that waited for no one, now folded gently into my memory. The light above grew softer. Not brighter. Not darker. Just softer. Like the last line of a lullaby. Like the final sigh before rest. And I walked onward into that light. Without hurry. Without fear. Without name. Just presence.